Hi everybody, today we're going to be looking at Vue.js, which is a data-driven JavaScript technology. Before we do that, let's just have a look at what we're going to be creating. Here I've got a basic form, and it's asking me to type in my name, and when I type in my name, which is Craig, you'll see that a little message underneath says your name is Craig, and then obviously I've got a reset button here, and if I hit the reset button, that clears the input box and it also clears the message. Now this is just our basic vanilla JavaScript. So if we have a look at what we've done for our input box, over here you can see that we're using the onKeyUp event and it's calling a setName method. So let's have a look at our JavaScript, and the setName method gets an element by ID name value and sets its inner HTML to the value of our input box. So this area here, it says your name is, this is the area which is name value. I'll just show you that span there. So I've put an ID on there called name value. And then we've got a second method which is called reset, and that just sets our name input. That's this bit here. And that just sets the value back to nothing. And then it calls setName again, which updates our little message down here. So it updates the inner HTML there. Back to the value of our name input, which is obviously nothing. So that's a pretty standard way of using our normal vanilla JavaScript. Essentially, we target elements on the page that we've given an ID, and we do some kind of manipulation in those areas. In our case, we've updated the inner HTML. With Vue, though, we don't actually manipulate the DOM manually. Instead, we update underlying data, and the Vue itself will handle the updates to our actual web page. So let's have a look at that. I'm going to create a new fiddle here. I've already brought in Bootstrap, and I've added a little bit of CSS here just to make it look a little bit better. You don't really need to worry too much about that. This is just the CSS for Bootstrap. I've not brought in the JavaScript. That's based on jQuery. So it doesn't really play very nicely with Vue. We might in another video look at some better kind of CSS frameworks that we can use with Vue. Things like Vuetify are brilliant, but there are a bunch of them. But for our purposes, we're just going to use the CSS just to make things look a little bit better. So the first thing we want to do is we want to bring in Vue, and JS Fiddle allows us to do that quite easily. It already knows where it is. So if I add that, there we go, we've got that in, and we want to re-add our input box. So if we put input type equals text, that will be our text box. Obviously it's nothing at the minute, and let's put in our classes. These are our Bootstrap classes, so I think that's called form control, and I think that'll update that. And let's put a little margin at the bottom, MB3. Let's rerun that, and there we go. And we want to put our placeholder back in, so there's placeholder equals, and I think we put type your name, like that. And if we run that, there we go, we've got our box back up. So now we want to be able to put our name in and then have Vue update our messages for us. We've obviously not got the message yet, but let's go over to our JavaScript and create our Vue instance. So to create a new Vue instance is pretty straightforward. You just type in new Vue, like that. And the Vue constructor takes an options object. So we'll put a little object here. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to give it an element to mount itself to. This is usually just called app. So we'll type that in there, and we haven't created this element yet, and so we want to wrap all of our code in a div with the ID app. So that's probably the only ID you're going to need in terms of Vue targeting anything, because we don't use IDs at all on any of these things. Instead, well, as you'll see, we use these to update the underlying data, and then the page will update. Okay, so that should mount our Vue instance onto this div with the ID app. And the first thing we want some kind of variable that represents our name. And so all of our variables go inside a data function, and data functions return objects. Technically, it's possible to have them not return these objects when you're not using the template compiler, and we're not doing that here. But I just think it's best practice to just always do that, because if you move from this and then go into single file components, you'll find that it gets a bit confusing because you've missed that return out, and it's only really one extra line of code, and it can cause you all sorts of debugging problems later on down the road, and you'll be running off to Stack Overflow and somebody will explain to you that you have to return an object. So just always put that return in, even though in our case we could actually leave it out here. So we want our variable to be called name, and we're just going to set that to nothing, right? So that's just our blank name. And let's come back over to our HTML. Right, in order for our text box to be able to update this name, we use something called vmodel. So we use vmodel equals name. Now, what that does is that binds our input box to the value of name here. And to prove that, if I update this to my name, Craig, and then run that again, you'll see that it appears inside the box. So all we've done is updated one bit of data, and it's been reflected on our web page. We didn't do anything over here to say that. We just said this is the value of, using vmodel, this is the value of our variable name. So if we move that back here, we could now use this to do our message. So let's put our message in. So we had your name is, and I should probably wrap that in a div. Let's just do that like so. So your name is, and then for Vue, in order to output our variables that are inside our data function onto the screen, we open curly braces. So 2 curly braces and 2 curly braces closed. If you've used something like Mustache before, you're probably quite familiar with that kind of syntax. And then we just type name in. There we go, like so. And then we'll rerun that. And if I type in my name here, as you see, that's been reflected there. So it's updating the value. So you know it's updating the value of name because we're typing it into that box, and then it's coming out. It's coming out in our message there. So we've got your name is, and then the value of name inside our data function. So that's a two-way binding, as you can see. So if we update the data here, then it will come out inside our box, and if we update the value of our box, it automatically updates our underlying data. Now the other thing that we did is we had a reset button. So let's put in our reset button. Button class equals, I'm going to need to go and copy and paste this from here because I don't use Bootstrap much. Here we go, class equals that, just to make it look a bit prettier. Button, and then reset, and let's just tidy this all up so that you can see what's going on. And if we hit run, hopefully we've got our reset button there. Obviously it doesn't do anything yet. I type in my name, hit reset, nothing's happening, obviously we've not done anything. So let's come back over to our Vue instance, and Vue has a data property called methods, which unsurprisingly is where we put all of our methods. And we're going to create a method, and we're going to call it reset, like so. And this is a ES6 syntax. So you can also pop function in front of that if you're more familiar with the ES5 syntax. And for our reset, we just need to make sure that we set our name back to nothing. So we put this dot name, and we always use this to target anything inside our data function. So this dot name, the Vue instance knows that we're referring to the value inside our data function. This dot name equals, and that equals nothing, right? So if we come back over to our HTML, how do we then attach that to our reset button? Well, Vue has an events system. You put V on, and then we put what event we want this to our reset button to execute on, excuse me. And so if we put V on click, which is our on click event essentially, and then we type in reset like that, and then we run that, should find that, and if I click reset, brilliant. So it's called our reset method over here, which is just reset that all back. And so we've got a much simpler, much cleaner piece of code using Vue. Incidentally, if you don't want to keep typing V on, we tend to just use this which is just the shorthand for V on. So if I run that there, you'll see that that does exactly the same thing. Retype in my name, you can then hit reset, and then it's gone back to blank. So the is probably a nice way to do it, but it's important to know that when you're looking at events, that's V on is the standard way of doing it. So that's basically an introduction to how Vue works. It's pretty straightforward. You update data, and then it's instantly reflected on your screen. You don't have to do any of this kind of DOM manipulation over here. Keeps all of our code nice and tidy, especially as we create larger apps. So I've hoped you've enjoyed the video. I hope you found it informative. It's my first one, so hopefully I did a decent enough job, and I'll try to get some more videos up for some more advanced Vue.js examples in future. So thanks for watching, and if you've made it this far, feel free to put a like on the video, and I'll see you next time.